There's an old saying that a person's true character is revealed when they think no one's watching. I used to think that was just a cliché, something people say to sound wise. But that night, I saw it firsthand, and it shook me to my core. It all started with something small, something I could have easily ignored, but for some reason, I didn't. And that's where everything went sideways. It was just another dinner party. Nothing special. The kind of evening you invite a few friends over, put some wine on the table, and pretend you're fancy for a few hours. I didn't even know why I'd agreed to host it. My wife, Sara, had been pestering me for days, insisting that we entertain people as if that was some sort of essential life goal. We hadn't had anyone over in a while, so she said it would be a nice change. I'd been cooking a lot recently, mostly to unwind after work. It was my thing. I didn't do it because I wanted recognition or because I thought I was a culinary genius. It was just my way of keeping sane. But lately, Sara had started picking apart everything I made. "Is that even a recipe?" she'd ask, eyeing my dishes with a raised brow. "Did you follow the directions, or just throw stuff in a pot?" At first, I thought she was joking, but her tone always had a certain edge. I started noticing it more and more, and it began to grate on me. Anyway, back to the dinner party. The evening was going like any other. Our friends were in the living room, chatting and laughing, while I put the finishing touches on the meal. The smell of roasted vegetables and seared steak filled the air. My masterpiece for the evening was a braised beef short rib with a rich red wine reduction. I'd spent hours preparing it, making sure every element was perfect. It was supposed to be the highlight of the night. Sara, as always, was playing the gracious hostess, making small talk, pouring drinks, and pretending to be overly invested in the evening's socializing. I could tell she wasn't really engaged, but then again, she never was when it came to the food. She didn't really get it. She didn't understand why I'd spend hours perfecting a dish when we could just order takeout. And then it happened. We were all sitting down to eat when I brought out the short ribs. I placed the dish in the center of the table, proud of the way it looked. The deep brown color of the meat, the glossy sauce that shimmered under the dim light. It was beautiful. I could feel the excitement of our guests, their anticipation as they dug in. But just as I was about to sit down, Sara made her move. "So," she said, her voice laced with that ever-familiar sarcasm. "This is what you've been cooking all day? I thought we were having something special, not this." I froze. My fork hovered in midair, and for a moment, the entire room went quiet. It wasn't a big thing. It wasn't even a loud insult. But the way she said it, the look on her face, it hit me in a way I didn't expect. I glanced at our friends. They didn't know how to react. Some of them tried to laugh it off. Others pretended not to notice. But I could see it. Everyone heard it, and everyone felt it. That wasn't just a joke. That was a dig. My stomach churned. My hands clenched around my fork, the knuckles going white. I looked at her. She wasn't even paying attention anymore, talking to Alex about some random topic. It was as if she'd thrown the dart and didn't even care to see where it landed. I took a deep breath, forced a smile, and continued eating, trying to pretend it didn't sting. But I could feel the heat rising in my face, my cheeks flushing. It was like I had been punched in the gut, and I couldn't let it go. I finished my meal, trying to ignore the sour taste in my mouth, but my thoughts kept swirling. All those little comments over the past few months. All those subtle jabs. It wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th time. It was like she had a habit of belittling me in front of people, trying to diminish everything I did. And the worst part? She never seemed to care about how it made me feel. By the time dessert came around, some fancy chocolate mousse I had made from scratch, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I had to say something, but I wasn't going to say it in front of our guests. I wasn't going to let her make a scene, make me feel small in front of everyone. No, I was going to wait. After they left, I'd have my say. But it wasn't going to be a fight. No, I wasn't just going to tell her I was angry. I was going to show her. I was going to give her a reality check. The night dragged on, and our friends slowly started to filter out. One by one, they said their goodbyes, and before long, it was just Sara and I left in the house, standing in the kitchen. The clinking of glasses and the sounds of laughter from the evening seemed so distant now. And then I said it. "So, about tonight." I began, my voice steady but cold. She turned to face me, eyes already narrowing. "What now? You're upset about the meal? Really?" She was dismissive, already brushing it off as nothing. "No," I said, my voice low, but with an edge. "I'm upset about how you've been treating me. For months, Sara, you make me feel like nothing I do is ever good enough. You make fun of my cooking, you belittle everything I do in front of our friends. Do you even realize it? She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. I don't need you to love my cooking. I don't even care if you think it's gourmet or not. But I will not stand here and let you humiliate me anymore. Not in front of people. Not in my own home. She stood there, stunned. I wasn't done yet, though. I had one more thing to say. I'm done being your punchline. And I hope you remember that next time you try to make a joke at my expense. Because it's not funny anymore. And then I walked away. The next few days felt like I was living in some kind of haze. It wasn't just the sting of Sara's words. It was the realization that I had been putting up with her behavior for far too long. I should have said something sooner. I should have stood up for myself, for the work I put into the food, for the effort I made to keep the house together. But I didn't. And that's what ate at me the most. It wasn't the fact that she mocked me. It was that I let her do it, over and over again. The tension between us was palpable. At first, Sara acted like nothing had happened. She continued to talk to me like we were fine, like the night hadn't been filled with awkward silences and subtle insults. But I could see it in her eyes, the way she avoided looking directly at me, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I knew something had shifted. I didn't want to make things worse, but I couldn't just act like everything was normal either. Every time I opened the fridge to grab something, I was reminded of the meals I'd cooked, the ones she'd shot down, the ones she'd mocked. And each time she brushed me off, it felt like another layer of respect was stripped away. A week passed, and Sara didn't bring up the dinner party again. But I could tell she was waiting for me to apologize, to backtrack, to act like nothing had happened. But that wasn't going to happen. I decided that when the moment came, I wouldn't back down. I couldn't. I needed her to see me for who I was, someone who deserved respect, especially in his own home. If she wouldn't acknowledge how she treated me, I'd force her to see it. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One evening, Sara mentioned we were having some friends over for drinks, and my stomach turned. I had a bad feeling about this. It wasn't that I didn't want to entertain, but I could already sense what was coming. The thought of Sara mocking me in front of our friends again made my blood boil. This time, I had a different plan. This time, I wasn't just going to stand there and let her take the lead. If she wanted to play this game, I was going to play it better. As the evening drew closer, I went into the kitchen early, setting up for a meal I knew Sara wouldn't expect. I wasn't going to make something fancy, not something she could easily criticize. I decided on a simple dish, a hearty stew, something warm and comforting. But the twist was in the details. I'd be making it with an ingredient I knew she absolutely hated, something I knew would challenge her to keep her mouth shut: truffle oil. I had a feeling she wouldn't be able to resist commenting on it. Sara was still getting ready when the doorbell rang. I could hear our friends entering the living room, chatting and laughing. I didn't rush. I took my time, perfecting the stew, making sure every flavor was deep, every ingredient rich with warmth. I wanted to show her that I wasn't just a hobbyist in the kitchen. I wanted to show her that I could create something she'd have to acknowledge. When I brought the stew to the table, I could see the skepticism in her eyes immediately. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't say anything at first. Our friends took their first bites, nodding in appreciation. They seemed genuinely impressed, and I couldn't help but notice the quiet shift in Sara's demeanor. She wasn't used to seeing me get attention for my cooking. She wasn't used to seeing people enjoy something I'd made, especially not when she thought it was beneath her. And then it happened. She leaned forward, trying to act casual, but I could see the edge in her voice. "What exactly is that taste?" she asked, barely looking up from her bowl. "Is that truffle oil?" I smiled, almost to myself. "Yes, it is. I thought I'd surprise you." Her eyes flickered with a mix of annoyance and disbelief. "Well, you know I'm not a fan of that. You could have just left it out." Our friends exchanged glances, and I could feel the room tense up. They were waiting for her to make her usual sarcastic comment. But this time, I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Not without a response. "Yeah, I could have," I said, "but I didn't. And sometimes it's good to step outside of our comfort zones. It's part of what makes cooking fun." Sara opened her mouth, clearly about to say something else, but I wasn't going to let her have the last word. Not this time. Not when I'd put so much effort into this meal. I leaned in a little, my voice calm but firm. "It's not just about what's on the plate, Sara. It's about respect. And if you can't show me that, then maybe we need to talk about what's really going on here." Her face went pale. It wasn't the dramatic, explosive confrontation I had envisioned, but it was enough. Enough for her to realize that I wasn't going to just let her mock me and belittle me anymore. I didn't need her approval, but I did need her to understand that I was done playing her game. For the rest of the evening, things were quieter. Sara didn't make any more jokes about my cooking. In fact, she barely said anything at all. The guests, sensing the change in the air, politely continued their conversations, and the night ended on a somewhat awkward note. But as they left, I knew something had shifted between Sara and me. She wasn't going to get away with mocking me anymore. And whatever came next, I wasn't going to back down. The next few days were a strange kind of silence. We went through the motions of everyday life. Sara rushing around with her usual schedule, me pretending to be okay. But something had changed. I wasn't the same guy who just let things slide anymore. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me, not after everything that had happened. It wasn't even about the meal anymore. It wasn't about truffle oil or fancy dishes. It was about how she saw me, how she had always seen me, like I was nothing more than a joke to her, a punchline to her little sarcastic quips. And I was done. What bothered me the most was how she seemed completely unaffected. She didn't apologize, didn't even seem to realize the weight of what had happened. In her eyes, it was just another day. But for me, it felt like a breaking point. A few days later, as we were both sitting in the living room, the air between us thick with unspoken words, Sara made a move. She looked at me, her usual playful grin on her face, and said, "Hey, I was thinking, maybe we should do another dinner with friends next week. We could even invite that couple from the office. You know, the ones who always rave about your cooking." Her words stung in a way I didn't expect. Did she seriously think I'd just fall back into the same pattern? Did she think I was going to smile and go along with it, pretending everything was fine? I could feel my pulse quicken as I tried to keep my cool. "Actually," I replied, my voice steady, "I don't think that's a good idea." Sara looked confused. "What do you mean? You used to love hosting." "I still do," I said, looking straight at her. "But I'm not going to pretend that everything's fine. You've been putting me down for a long time, Sara. You might not see it, but I do. And I'm done with it." The silence between us was suffocating. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I could see the surprise in her eyes, the realization that I wasn't going to back down this time. It was clear she hadn't expected me to say anything at all, let alone stand up for myself. "Maybe it's time we had a real conversation about respect," I added, my voice quiet but firm. "Because this has gone on long enough." She sat back, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she was going to argue, to brush me off like she always did. But she didn't. She just stared at me, her lips tight, as if she was finally processing what I had said. And then, without another word, she stood up and left the room. It was the first time in ages that I felt a sense of power, a sense of control over my own life. I wasn't going to let her treat me like I was invisible, like I was just the guy who cooked meals and made her life easier. I was done with that role. For the first time in a long time, I realized I had the strength to make her understand. But this was only the beginning. What came next would be the real test. The following week felt like walking on eggshells. I could tell Sara was trying to act normal, like nothing had changed. But I could feel the shift. I wasn't pretending anymore, and I could see that bothered her. Her usual playful tone had been replaced with a cool detachment. She wasn't mocking me anymore, at least not directly. But there was something beneath the surface that made everything feel off. I didn't mind the silence. Honestly, I welcomed it. It gave me space to think, to realize how long I had let her chip away at me without even realizing it. I'd been giving, trying to make her happy, always trying to please her. But in return, I'd been made to feel small. And I knew it was time to flip the script. Sara had always loved control. Whether it was over the household or our social circle, she liked to be the one in charge. I was fine with it for the most part, until now. The dinner parties, the comments, the way she'd belittle everything I did. It wasn't just about the food. It was about how she saw me, how she saw us. But I wasn't going to just sit back and let her dictate the narrative anymore. That night, I decided to take the reins. No more waiting for her to change. I wasn't going to wait for an apology either. I knew that wasn't coming. Instead, I was going to show her what it felt like to be put in her place, without saying a word. The opportunity came sooner than I thought. Sara had been talking for days about going out with some of her friends for a girls' night. She was excited about it, planning her outfit and talking about all the places they'd go. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, it hit me. What better way to make my point than to take control of the house while she was gone? I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, putting together a meal that would surprise even me. I didn't need her approval, but I wanted her to understand that I could create something amazing, something she couldn't critique or diminish. This time, I was going all out, not just with the ingredients, but with the presentation. It was going to be flawless. I'd chosen a delicate seared tuna with a citrus glaze, paired with a perfectly prepared risotto and a fresh garden salad. Simple, yet elegant. I knew it would impress. But there was a twist. I wasn't going to serve it to her. Instead, I set the table just as I would if we were hosting guests, except this time, it was just me and my own thoughts. The irony hit me as I placed the plates and poured myself a glass of wine. It felt good, empowering, even. For once, I wasn't cooking for someone else. I was cooking for me. Sara came home later that evening, her laughter echoing through the door as she entered. She was in a great mood, having enjoyed her night out with her friends. She came into the kitchen, glancing at the empty plates on the table. "Did you make something?" she asked, surprised. "Did you cook all this by yourself?" I turned around, my voice calm but filled with a quiet strength. "Yeah, I did. Thought I'd try something new." She walked over, picking up a fork and tasting the tuna. Her eyes widened. "Wow, this is actually good." She paused, then looked at me, as if trying to gauge my reaction. "Is this some kind of apology meal?" she asked, almost teasing. "No," I said, taking a sip of wine. "It's not about apologies. It's about respect. You've been making fun of my cooking for months, Sara. So I thought I'd show you what it's really like when I do something for myself, without your input." For a moment, there was silence. I could see the realization dawn on her face. It wasn't what I said that hit her. It was how I had said it. I wasn't angry, but I was firm. For once, I wasn't the one sitting back, waiting for her to acknowledge me. I was in control, and it made her uncomfortable. She didn't know how to respond. I wasn't asking for her approval anymore. I wasn't begging for validation. I didn't need her to praise me or apologize. I had done what I had set out to do. I had taken my power back. Sara sat down at the table, the tension between us still palpable, but something had shifted. I could tell she was processing, probably realizing how much I had been holding back. I wasn't going to make this easy for her anymore. If she wanted respect, she was going to have to earn it. For the rest of the evening, the conversation was sparse, but it didn't feel like the awkward silence from before. It felt different, more reflective. When I finally got up to clear the table, I turned to her one last time. "Next time, if you don't like something, don't mock me in front of others. It's not funny, and it's not okay." She didn't say anything in return, but I didn't need her to. The message had been delivered. That night, as I went to bed, I felt a sense of relief. I had finally stopped letting her push me around. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning of a much larger conversation. I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. The following days after the dinner experiment were eerily quiet. Sara and I didn't discuss what had happened the night before, and it seemed like we both had settled into an unspoken truce. But the silence wasn't the peaceful kind. It was more like a quiet storm, waiting to explode. I could feel the tension building under the surface, but I wasn't sure if Sara even realized it. It was in the way she moved around the house, distant, almost cautious. She hadn't been making snide remarks about my cooking anymore, but there was something else. A sort of distance that hadn't been there before. She started spending more time out with her friends, coming home late, sometimes not saying much when she did. One afternoon, I was working in the living room when I heard her phone buzzing. I didn't mean to snoop. I really didn't. But the way her phone kept vibrating, over and over again, caught my attention. The name on the screen made my stomach twist. It was a message from Mark, her old colleague from work. I quickly looked away, trying to shake off the feeling of unease. But that name wouldn't leave my mind. Mark had always been a bit too friendly with Sara. I had never thought much of it, not until now. After everything that had happened, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut that something wasn't quite right. A few hours later, Sara came into the living room, looking flustered. I didn't say anything about the phone. I didn't have proof, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But something had shifted between us. "You're quiet today," she said, her voice soft, almost too soft. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I replied, my voice neutral. "Just thinking." She looked at me for a moment, as if trying to read my expression, then shrugged. "Well, I'm heading out to grab coffee with the girls. Don't wait up. I nodded without looking up, and she left the house. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this silence wasn't just about me. It felt like Sara was hiding something. I wasn't sure what, but the unease was unmistakable. That evening, when she returned, the air between us was thick. She seemed more distant than ever, like she was avoiding me. I decided to confront her. I had no proof, but I couldn't ignore the feeling anymore. The things she had said, the way she had been acting, the messages from Mark, it all added up to something I couldn't brush aside. Sara, I said as she set down her purse, we need to talk. She froze for a second, then turned slowly to face me. Her eyes flickered with something. Was it guilt? About what? She asked, her voice guarded. About you and Mark. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I saw the messages. What's going on? Her face shifted, but there was no denying the shock in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, lie to me, but instead, she just stood there. I didn't think you'd ever find out, she whispered. There it was. The truth, hanging in the air between us. Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I hadn't expected it. In my mind, I had convinced myself that I was overreacting, that maybe I was reading too much into her messages with Mark. But hearing her admit it, hearing her confess, changed everything. I didn't think you'd ever find out, she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. There was no anger in her tone, no defensiveness. Just guilt. I couldn't speak for a moment. I wasn't sure what to say. My mind raced, jumping from one thought to the next, unable to settle. Everything. The silence, the distance between us, the way she'd treated me over the past few months. It suddenly made sense. Is it just him? I asked, the words leaving my mouth before I even had a chance to filter them. I wasn't angry yet, but I could feel the anger starting to build. I didn't want to hear more, but part of me needed to know the truth. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. It's been complicated. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go this far. Complicated, I repeated, the bitterness rising in my throat. You're telling me you've been seeing him behind my back, and it's complicated? I stood up, my legs suddenly shaky. It felt like the room was spinning. How'd I miss this? All those subtle signs, the late nights, the quiet withdrawal from our life together, it had been there all along. But I had been so focused on her mocking me in the kitchen, on trying to win back her respect, that I never saw the betrayal right in front of me. I never meant to hurt you, she continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I thought I could handle both him and you, but it was stupid. I'm sorry. I should have told you the truth sooner. The words were meaningless to me. Sorry didn't fix anything. Sorry didn't erase the months of lies, of secretive messages, of nights she spent with someone else while I cooked dinner alone, thinking everything was fine. I looked at her, trying to process everything, trying to decide what I felt. Part of me wanted to shout, to demand answers, to make her feel the pain I was feeling. But another part of me knew this wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. About how I had let things go on for too long, how I had ignored my own needs, my own dignity, for the sake of someone who didn't even value me. I need space, I said, my voice cold and calm. I surprised myself with how collected I sounded. I need to think. I need to figure out what I'm going to do next. Sara stood there, looking like a child caught in a lie. Her lips trembled as she took a step forward, but I raised a hand, stopping her. Don't, I said softly, shaking my head. Don't come any closer. I need to be alone right now. She opened her mouth to speak, but I turned and walked away, retreating to the bedroom. I couldn't face her any longer, not when everything had been laid bare. I stood by the window, staring out into the night, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind. Everything had changed in the span of a few minutes. I couldn't go back to the way things were. The trust had been shattered, and no amount of cooking, no amount of apologies, could fix it now. I knew what I had to do, but that didn't make it any easier. The decision felt heavy, almost suffocating. But I also knew that this was my moment, my chance to take control of my life again. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to let her betrayal destroy the person I had worked so hard to become. As I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. This wasn't just about her. This was about me. And I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel small anymore. The following morning felt like I was waking up in a completely different world. The weight of Sara's confession hung heavily in the air, suffocating the space between us. When I opened my eyes, I expected to feel a wave of anger or devastation, but instead, I felt numb. It was like the emotional roller coaster I had been on for months had finally come to a stop, and I was left standing still, trying to catch my breath. Sara hadn't come to bed last night. I wasn't surprised. She probably needed time to figure out what to say, or maybe she was avoiding me. Either way, I was done waiting for her to make a move. It was time for me to decide what I wanted. I didn't rush. I didn't want to make any hasty decisions out of anger, but deep down, I knew that what I needed now wasn't more apologies or empty promises. I needed clarity. I needed to figure out if this was a relationship worth salvaging or if it was time to walk away. As the hours passed, I kept thinking back to the dinner party. The way Sara had belittled me in front of our friends. The mocking tone in her voice. How she made me feel so insignificant, so small. And the more I thought about it, the more it seemed like this had been building for a long time. It wasn't just about that one moment. It was about a pattern, one where I was always the joke, always the one left picking up the pieces while she got to play the role of the perfect, untouchable wife. But what made it worse was how she hid her actions from me. The late nights, the secret messages, the obvious emotional distance. She wasn't just mocking my cooking, she was mocking me. My trust, my love, my efforts. The door creaked open, pulling me from my thoughts. I didn't have to look up to know it was Sara. She stood in the doorway, looking hesitant, almost like she was waiting for me to say something, anything. But I didn't want to make this easy for her. I wasn't going to just forgive her because she asked me to. I wasn't going to pretend that everything could go back to normal. I need to talk to you, Sara said, her voice quiet, almost apologetic. I nodded but didn't look at her. Go ahead. She stepped into the room, her eyes searching mine for some sign of how I felt. But I didn't give her one. I kept my gaze steady, my posture firm. I wasn't going to let her manipulate the situation. I'm sorry, she began, her words slow and careful. I know I've hurt you. I never meant for things to get out of hand. I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away. I should have been honest with you. You deserve so much more than this. I let her speak. I let her apologize, let her pour out her guilt. But it didn't make me feel better. It didn't fix the mess we were in. Do you love him? I asked, cutting through her words. I needed to know. I needed her to answer honestly. Her face tightened, and for a moment, she hesitated. Then, her voice barely audible, she said, I don't know. I thought I did, but I was wrong. It's complicated. I never wanted to hurt you. You've always been good to me. The pain of hearing her say that made my chest tighten. But there was something else there too, something colder. A realization that I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just about a mistake. This wasn't just a bad phase in our marriage. This was a betrayal. I looked at her, my heart heavy with the weight of everything I was about to say. Sara, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending like this isn't destroying me. Her face crumpled as she took a step toward me, reaching for my hand. But I pulled away. No, I said, my voice firm, finally breaking the silence that had been weighing us down. I've spent too long letting you make me feel small, and now I'm done. She froze, her hand still outstretched, and for the first time in months, I saw a real fear in her eyes. The kind of fear you see when someone knows they've lost control. But it didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made the decision clearer. I'm not going to wait around for you to figure out what you want, I continued, the words coming easier now. I'm done being the guy who's always trying to fix things, always trying to prove myself to you. I deserve more than that. And if you can't see it, then I have to move on. Her face paled, but she didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say, not really. We both knew this moment had been coming for a while now. I stood up, my voice calm, but full of resolve. I think it's time for us to separate, Sara. I need space. I need time to figure out who I am without you. She opened her mouth to protest, but I shook my head. No, it's done. And just like that, the years we'd spent together, the meals I had cooked, the laughter and the fights, all seemed to fade into the background. I didn't feel relief, but I felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. It had been a few months since Sara and I parted ways. The house felt different without her in it, quieter, more peaceful, but in a way, I could breathe again. The weight of pretending everything was fine, of walking on eggshells just to avoid another fight, had been lifted. I'd taken the time to focus on myself, something I had neglected for far too long. I rediscovered my love for cooking, but this time, I did it for me. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. The first few weeks after the separation were rough. I wasn't going to lie and say it was easy. There were moments when I second-guessed myself, when the loneliness crept in and the silence of the house felt like a loud reminder of everything that had gone wrong. But I knew deep down that I had made the right decision. No one should ever feel like they're not enough, especially when they've given everything to make a relationship work. One night, about 6 weeks after we separated, I was invited to a local food competition. A charity event, actually, where local chefs and home cooks came together to create a memorable dinner. I hesitated at first. I hadn't entered any competitions like this in years, and honestly, I wasn't sure I still had what it took. But something inside me clicked. Maybe it was the realization that I was doing this for me. Not for anyone's approval, not for validation, but because I loved it. The night of the event, I was in my element. I worked with focus, preparing a 3-course meal with all the dishes I had come to love. There was something cathartic about being there, around people who appreciated food the way I did, not as a way to prove something, but as an art form, as a way to connect. I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. And then it happened. As I was plating my final dish, I looked up and saw a familiar face in the crowd, Sara. She was with some friends, laughing a little too loudly, clearly trying to look like she was having the time of her life. I couldn't help but notice how she looked. Her makeup was a little too heavy, her smile forced. But what struck me the most was the way she watched me. She didn't know I'd entered the competition, and I could see the shock in her eyes when she realized I was one of the chefs. A part of me wanted to walk over and say something, but I didn't. I wasn't there for her anymore. I was there for myself. To prove to myself that I could still do this, that I was still worthy of success and happiness without her. The night went on, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as the judges approached my table. They tasted the food, exchanged a few words, and finally, the announcement came. And the winner is Chef Ethan. The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. As I walked up to accept the award, I glanced over at Sara, whose face was now a mask of forced composure. She was clapping, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't ignore, regret. I wasn't sure if she realized it then, but as I held that trophy in my hand, I knew something had shifted between us. She hadn't expected me to succeed. She hadn't expected me to find my own strength after everything that had happened. She thought I would crumble without her, but the truth was, I was better off without her. Later that evening, as I was leaving the event, I passed by Sara one last time. She tried to catch my eye, but I didn't look her way. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. I had moved on, and I was finally at peace with my life. As I stepped into the night air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The man who had spent months feeling small, feeling invisible, was gone. In his place was someone who had learned to stand tall, someone who had found his voice again. I wasn't just a guy who cooked meals anymore. I was someone who had learned the hard way that the only validation I needed was my own. And as for Sara, well, life had a way of teaching people lessons, didn't it? It wasn't for me to decide her fate, but the truth always has a way of catching up with you. In the end, the person who mocks others, who belittles those who care for them, will always find themselves alone. And no amount of pretend confidence or flashy social media posts could hide that reality from Sara, just as no one could hide it from me anymore.